June 15th, 1996, Riverside County, Landfill, California. The morning sun had only been up for a few hours, but already the dump was smothered under a heavy, oppressive heat. The air was thick, the sharp stench of rotting food mixed with the metallic tang of rust, and even the distant desert wind couldn't carry the smell away. Swarms of flies danced like black specks over the trash, occasionally rising in a cloud before settling again. Tommy Martinez had been working this landfill for 12 years. He'd seen rain, storms, rats, dogs, even homeless people emerging from the piles on his night shifts. None of it was foreign to him. During those long hours, he'd come across hundreds of things that turned his stomach, left a bitter ache inside him. But this was his bread and butter. You get used to the smell, he'd always say. After a while, your nose just stops working. That morning, like always, he headed toward his bulldozer before the sun became unbearable. His t-shirt was already sticking to his back. His boots sank into the mud with each step, crushing cardboard and plastic beneath him. He squinted and lit a cigarette as he fired up the engine. The day's job was simple: flatten the heaps of garbage dumped by the trucks. Make room for the next load. Business as usual. Tommy worked more skillfully, more carefully than the others. Some of his co-workers would just roar over the trash, crushing everything in their path, but not him. Because sometimes things surfaced that you couldn't undo. Once, a shard of an old bicycle got lodged in his wheel. Another time, he hadn't seen a dog thrown out with the trash until it was too late. And to this day, he still felt like he'd been punched in the gut when he thought of it. It was just after 9 when he was making his slow, deliberate way through the mounds. He sank the blade into the trash and lifted it with a groan of the engine. Rotten food, plastic bags, a broken chair, an old toy doll, all tangled together at the tip of the blade. He nudged the machine forward a little more. Then came the sound. Tying! A metallic, high-pitched clang, like the blade had struck something hard. His ears rang. He killed the engine. The sudden silence pressed in around him. That resistance, it felt different. He climbed down from the cab. Slowly, boots sinking, he waded into the trash. Flies buzzed around him as he gripped his gloves tighter and bent toward the dark shape at the tip of the blade. Buried under mud, dust, and torn plastic was something thick and dark. He grabbed it and pulled. A layer of dirt slid off. It was heavy and familiar somehow. There was a faded insignia, a torn name tag, and a word still legible: California Highway Patrol. Tommy's stomach churned. Acid rose in his throat as he swallowed hard. He'd seen just about everything in 12 years here. But this was different. It was a bulletproof vest. Something that didn't belong here. A cop's vest. He stumbled back, dropping it, taking a few steps away. His breath quickened, hands shaking inside his gloves. His knees felt weak. Staring at the vest, the only thought in his mind was, how did this get here? He stood there for a long while. Despite the smoke and stench rising from the trash, all he could hear in his head was that metallic tying. Then he snapped out of it. He reached into his pocket and pulled out his phone. His voice cracked as he dialed a 911. Yeah, Riverside County Landfill. I think you need to see this. There's a police vest. Looks like it's been here a long time. The operator ran through the standard questions: name, location, details. He gave them all in a trembling voice. Finally, they told him, sit tight and wait. Tommy sat by the bulldozer, a big man, sitting in the middle of the trash. The flies buzzed as buzzing had never felt so unbearable. About 40 minutes later, the first units arrived. Sirens cut through the landfill's quiet. Tommy jumped to his feet. Detective Sarah Chun from the Riverside County Sheriff's Department and her team were the first to arrive, followed by Captain Mike Rodriguez from the California Highway Patrol. Detective Chun slipped on her gloves as she approached and looked down at the vest. The insignia still glinted faintly amidst the garbage. You didn't touch it much, did you? She asked sharply. No, Tommy said. Left it just like I found it. The team quickly cordoned off the area with tape. Cameras flashed. They carefully lifted the vest. Detective Chun bent closer to the tag. Serial numbers still partially legible, she said. We can trace it. Captain Rodriguez nodded stiffly. The corner of his mouth trembled. If this belonged to one of ours... He couldn't finish. His eyes stayed fixed on the vest. Tommy stood a few steps back. The team slipped the vest into an evidence bag. The police lights lit up the mounds of trash. There was a hush in the air. Everyone was thinking the same thing. Here, in the middle of this dump, a secret that had been buried for years had surfaced. Rodriguez's phone rang. 2 hours later, when he ended the call, his face was pale. He took a long breath and looked at Chun. The vest. It belonged to Officer Elena Vasquez. She disappeared in 1981. Tommy had never heard the name before, but the look in Rodriguez's eyes said it all. A female officer who vanished 15 years ago. And now, her vest, here, in the middle of the dump, at the tip of his bulldozer. At that moment, Tommy no longer felt the heat, the flies, or the stench. It was as though he stood in the quietest place on earth. June 15th, 1996, Los Angeles. LAPD headquarters Detective Marcus Vasquez had been back from his lunch break for 15 minutes. He was shuffling through files, sinking into the routine of an ordinary day. On the upper floor of the station, sunlight crept heavily through the tall windows, stretching across the room. Papers, photographs, reports were piled on his desk. All the same, murder, robbery, drugs. Then the phone rang. At first he didn't bother. He knew every ringing phone only brought more trouble, but it kept ringing. Finally, he picked up the receiver. Detective Vasquez. Marcus, this is Captain Mike Rodriguez from the CHP. A bead of sweat traced down Marcus's back. CHP? The California Highway Patrol? He hadn't gotten a call like this in 15 years. He swallowed. Yes, how can I help you? This isn't an easy call, Rodriguez said, his voice heavy and serious. It's about your sister, Elena. There's been a development. The world went silent. He gripped the edge of the desk. His knuckles turned white. His throat went dry. What do you mean? Elena? The Elena we haven't heard from in 15 years? Today, at the Riverside County landfill, her vest was found. CHP issued. The serial number was checked. It's definitely hers. Suddenly, the noise of the room vanished. The sound of keyboards clacking from nearby desks, the chatter of detectives, the ringing phones, all of it blurred. Only one sentence burned into his mind. Her vest was found. 15 years. 15 years he'd searched, dreamed, sometimes hoped, sometimes tried to forget in anger. And now the answer came rushing back. I'm coming, he said. He heard the tremor in his voice but didn't care. I'll give you the address. You should join us. We're reopening it, Marcus. The case is open again, Rodriguez said. Marcus hung up. He rested his hands on his knees and sat there for a while, bowed his head, rubbed his face with both hands. In that moment, he tried to figure out if he was ready, but he didn't know the answer. His sister, Elena Vasquez, had vanished in October of 1981 at the age of 26, while on duty as a highway patrol officer, found in the middle of the desert, next to her patrol car, engine still running, gun missing, driver's door open, but no trace of her. Dozens of officers, hundreds of volunteers had searched for days. They tore the desert apart, but they found nothing. No body, no clues, no sign. It was as if the earth had swallowed her whole. And now, a piece, a trace, her vest. Marcus opened the file cabinet. He pulled out a dusty box with Elena written on it. He hadn't opened it in 15 years. He'd never had the courage, but now he unlatched it with his hands and looked inside. An old photo. Elena in uniform, smiling wide, a young woman full of life. Next to her, himself. That day, Elena had kept teasing him as they posed. "You're gonna frame this for your office, little brother." His eyes welled up. Little brother, she'd always called him, even though they were only 2 years apart. But in her eyes, Marcus had always been the kid. Her courage, her determination had always made him feel small. Elena was the one who did everything right, the perfect one who followed in their father's footsteps and became a cop. He remembered the last night he spoke to her. She had picked up the phone, her voice tired but alive. "Sometimes I'm afraid this job is going to eat me alive," she'd said. "What do you mean?" "I see things, bad things, but for now, I just do my job. Don't worry. When it gets worse, I'll tell you. Promise, promise." But she never did. The next day, she was gone. Her disappearance had torn the family apart. Their mother prayed every morning, wept herself to sleep every night. Their father had withdrawn, dying years later of a heart attack. Marcus buried himself in work. He never married, never had a real relationship. All his energy had gone into catching criminals. But Elena's file had always stayed at the very bottom of his drawer, untouchable, off limits. And now, it was time to pull it out. He grabbed his jacket, tucked his badge into his pocket. As he walked out, a few colleagues glanced his way but said nothing. Because everyone knew Marcus's story. Everyone knew Elena's story. He stepped into the elevator. His fingers were still trembling. When he emerged into the sunlit street, the hot Los Angeles air hit his face. He took a deep breath, as though he was stepping back into that desert, into the smell of dust and decay, setting out to find his sister once again. June 15th, 1996, Riverside County Landfill. Marcus's car sped down the highway stretching from San Bernardino to Riverside. His eyes stayed fixed on the road, but in his mind the image of the vest kept playing over and over. His sister's vest, buried in the dirt for 15 years, thrown there by God knows whose hands. He loosened his grip on the wheel. The air was hot and dry, the sky a metallic grey. Signs lined the roadside, power lines rose in the distance. All of it reminded him of some nightmares he'd seen before. At one point his palms grew slick with sweat, and he pulled over. He took Elena's photo out of his pocket, the one of her in uniform. Her eyes sparkled in it, her smile almost defiant. "What did you get yourself into, Elena?" he murmured. He climbed back in and headed toward Riverside's industrial zone. When he reached the landfill entrance, dozens of police cruisers and a few unmarked cars were already there. Trucks were lined up just outside the area cordoned off with yellow tape. Deputies and CHP officers in vests stood around, talking into radios, scanning the scene. Marcus parked and stepped out. Under the harsh sun, everyone's face glistened with sweat. Jackets dust-streaked. For a moment, the motion around him seemed to slow. Some officers glanced his way. A few even bowed their heads respectfully, because there wasn't a soul here who didn't know Elena's story. Captain Mike Rodriguez spotted him and came over immediately. A broad-shouldered, dark-skinned man in his early 50s. He offered Marcus his warm, calloused hand. "Marcus, I'm sorry. It's a hard day." "Thank you," Marcus replied in a low voice. "Where did you find it?" Rodriguez motioned with his chin. "Let's not say found. It surfaced during digging. Come on." Together they walked among the towering piles of trash. The ground was soft, uneven, making each step sink a little deeper. Up ahead, a bulldozer and several workers stood near a taped-off pit where 2 officers knelt, examining something. Rodriguez kept speaking. A worker named Tommy Martinez noticed it, said the machine hit something solid, and he stopped to check. The vest was caked in dirt, tar, chemicals, but still recognizable. Marcus crouched slowly. The vest lay before him now. Its color had turned almost brown. The patches faded, but the embroidered logo in the center still stood out faintly. the CHP badge, and a worn name tag. Vasquez. For a moment, his knees almost gave way. He reached for it but hesitated, barehanded. An officer beside him handed him a pair of gloves. Marcus slid them on and carefully lifted the vest. The fabric was stiff, the edges torn, but here it was. His sister's. She always wore it, he whispered. Never took it off. Then someone took it off, Rodriguez said, and brought it here. Marcus looked up. As he scanned the surroundings, he noticed things he hadn't before. The landfill. It was like a graveyard. Broken toys, ripped up chairs, rotting paper and furniture, all jumbled together. He tried to imagine how the vest had ended up here among all this filth. Rodriguez crouched beside him and met his eyes. The serial numbers intact, still in the CHP records. This officially belongs to Elena, and now everything starts again. Marcus stood. Around him, officers watched, some whispering. In that moment, he understood. This wasn't just a turning point for him. It was for everyone. Maybe they'd all thought the case was lost forever in dusty files, but now the truth was clawing its way out. Rodriguez walked beside him. We've been reviewing the reports from 15 years ago. A lot of questions were left unanswered back then. This vest might answer some of them, but it'll probably make others even harder. Marcus nodded. That night, there wasn't the slightest trace. Radio went dead, car left open, no signs of a struggle, no gunshots. She just vanished. Now I see. Someone planned everything. Just then, another detective approached. Detective Vasquez, I'm Sarah Chun, Riverside Sheriff's Department. I told them I wanted to meet you. Marcus turned, shaking hands with a young woman whose gaze was serious but steady. Pleasure to meet you. We've packaged the vest carefully, Chun said. Our team will examine it. If there's any evidence left, we'll do DNA and fiber analysis. But after all these years, Marcus cut her off. Whatever you find, you find. But we will learn what happened to my sister. We'll question everyone. We'll tear through every detail. Chun gave him a meaningful look. I feel the same way. Marcus stepped a little away from the group and stood still. In the middle of the landfill, he looked around. At the edge of the pit, a worker still smoked a cigarette. Everything seemed to quiet down. The sky seemed to darken, the sun sinking lower over the mounds of garbage. In that moment, he swore to himself, Elena, I won't leave you here. They thought you'd be forgotten. But I won't forget. No matter what it takes, I'll find the ones who did this. June 16th, 1996. San Bernardino Sheriff's Department. Archives Division. The next morning, when Marcus stepped into the building where his sister's missing persons files were kept, he felt a heavy weight settle over him. This place, even the smell was familiar. Damp paper, dust, the faint scent of old leather bindings. He'd walked these corridors many times before, feeling the chill of the archive as he'd researched cases with his father back in the day. But now he was here for a different reason. For Elena. The clerk, leafing through an old ledger, asked without looking up. Which file? Vasquez, Elena Vasquez, 1981, missing officer case. The clerk glanced up, and a flicker of sadness crossed his face. Ah, yes, I remember. Back shelves, second row, box 72. Marcus murmured his thanks and walked toward the shelves. Dust lay thick as a finger on the boxes. When he reached the box, he paused instinctively. With his fingertips, he traced the faded ink on the lid. Elena Vasquez, missing file. He lifted it slowly, carried it to a table, and sat down. When he opened the lid, yellowed photographs, typewritten reports, and handwritten notes spilled out. He took a deep breath and picked up the first document, the crime scene report. October 12th, 1981, 23:57. Patrol car found abandoned on the shoulder of Highway 15. Driver's door open, engine still running. Officer Vasquez was not located. No signs of struggle in or around vehicle. Service weapon missing. Last radio communication at 23:47 reported stopping a red pickup truck. Marcus's eyes lingered on that phrase. Red pickup. The vest they'd found at the landfill. That final radio call. The eerie silence inside the vehicle. Something didn't fit. The next sheet. Witness statements. Elena's fellow officers said much the same thing. She seemed normal, maybe a little tired, but in good spirits. Didn't notice anything unusual that night. Last time I saw her, she was reading a file, getting ready. But one statement stood out, a single line that caught his attention. In the last few weeks, she was making lots of photocopies. When I asked what for, she just said, "Someday I'll need them." Marcus closed the file and scribbled in his notebook. Photocopy files? Where? The next document, scene photos. Her patrol car at night on the shoulder of a dark road. Interior light glowing. Driver's door ajar. Tire tracks continued down the road for a while, then vanished. Then another report. Odometer on vehicle showed approximately 180 miles more than that night's assigned patrol route. Reason unknown. A chill ran through him. 180 extra miles. Where had she gone? Who had she met? He made a new heading in his notebook. Extra mileage, 180 miles. Missing photocopies. Pickup driver unidentified. Hours passed in the archive. He combed through every page, every photo. Then a small envelope slipped out from between the pages. Inside was a note, written in a hand he recognized immediately. "Don't trust Morrison. I found the names, but I am not sure yet. Be careful." It had to be Elena's handwriting. Morrison, the shift supervisor at the time. In his official statement, "I remember speaking to Elena around 22:30. Might not show up in the reports, but we talked. She said everything was fine." But the radio logs held no record of that conversation. Morrison's story didn't hold up. Marcus rose from the table, carefully replaced the documents in the box, but slipped Elena's note into his pocket. He gave the box one last look, then handed it back to the clerk with a deep breath. Outside, Detective Sarah Chun was waiting for him. "Find anything?" Marcus nodded. "Too many unanswered questions. Too many loose ends. I need to talk to Morrison." Sarah nodded back. "I'll find his address. But Marcus, don't lose yourself in this. Sometimes the answers hurt." Marcus narrowed his eyes. "It's already been hurting for 15 years. It can't get worse." June 17th, 1996. Morrison's farm, outskirts of Riverside. The next morning, Sarah had tracked down Morrison's address. Marcus drove out at dawn. The farm smelled of hay and earth. Horses grazed in the distance. Morrison, in his 60s now, with sunburnt skin and cracked hands, was mending a fence. When Marcus got out of the car, Morrison noticed him. He set his pliers down slowly. "Detective Vasquez, you finally came. You were expecting me. I knew you'd come one day." They moved to the porch and sat. Morrison offered him a glass of iced tea. Marcus got right to the point. "That night, you said you spoke to Elena at 22:30, but there's no record of it. Did you really talk to her?" Morrison rubbed his hands together, staring into the distance. "We didn't." "Why did you lie?" "Because I was scared. That night she came to me and gave me some names, big names. Inside the department, prosecutors, judges, drugs and money, too big. She said, 'I won't stay quiet.' I told her to let it go. Then she disappeared." A cold dread settled in Marcus's chest. "Who were the names?" "I can't say. Even now I can't. They're still powerful. That radio conversation I made up because I didn't know what else to do. Marcus stood, his fists clenched. She was killed because of them. I know. And she still looks at me in my dreams. I couldn't protect her. You be careful, Marcus. Whatever you find, they're still out there. Marcus walked off the porch and toward his car. His eyes stung. As he slid behind the wheel, he wrote one more note in his notebook. Morrison lied, couldn't protect her, but I will. That night, when Marcus returned home, he spread the files across his bed. He examined each note, each suspect name, each tiny detail written in Elena's hand, and he started a list. Missing photocopies, pickup driver unidentified, extra 180 miles, Morrison's lie. The names Elena mentioned at the bottom, he wrote in bold letters. I will find them. Then the phone rang. It was Sarah. Marcus, you're not going to like this, but one of the names, Vincent Carrera, he's in Elena's notes, and someone claims she met with him. Marcus's heart began to pound. Where? Los Angeles, at his old office. We can see him tomorrow. Marcus hung up and glanced once more at the files scattered over his bed. He picked up Elena's photo and stared at it for a long time. Tomorrow, he whispered. Tomorrow, we start hunting them. June 18th, 1996, Los Angeles, Elite Protection Services. Before dawn the next morning, Marcus was already on the road. Sarah drove, her eyes fixed on the highway ahead, both of their minds occupied by the dark doors they were about to open. Vincent Carrera, a veteran narcotics officer turned wealthy businessman. Now he ran a glittering private security firm, protecting the city's elite. Elena's notes had mentioned his name. Watch Carrera's files carefully, she'd written. He might have been at the top of the list Morrison called the big names. Sarah glanced at Marcus. You ready? You're never really ready, but when it comes, you have to ask the questions anyway. The office was in a 15-story tower in the heart of the city, on the top floor. When the elevator doors opened, they stepped into a bright lobby where smiling secretaries waited by white leather chairs. Awards and certificates lined the walls, along with photographs of Carrera posing with politicians and celebrities. A secretary led them to a waiting room. A few minutes later, the heavy wooden door opened and Vincent Carrera appeared. He was surprisingly self-assured, shoulders squared, silver-streaked hair, sharp blue eyes alert. His black suit was immaculate, though Marcus noticed a faint tremor in his hands. Detectives, welcome. This is about that old case, isn't it? Marcus reached into his pocket and pulled out a photo of Elena. Yes, this is my sister, Elena Vasquez. She disappeared in 1981. Last we know, she was investigating some files tied to you. Carrera studied the photo. His expression didn't change. Then he smiled faintly. Ah, yes. Young officer. Tragic loss. But you know, back then, nobody in narcotics was innocent. Marcus stepped closer, voice pressing. That night, she discovered discrepancies in your operations. The numbers she reported and what the courts received didn't match. She noticed. Carrera inhaled deeply and sat down. Look, back then, politicians demanded results. They wanted numbers. So we gave them numbers. Sure, some pockets got heavier, but that's how the war was fought. Marcus's voice sharpened. Did you silence her? Carrera's eyes flicked away for just a moment. No, but I knew she would be silenced. Still, he gestured vaguely at the papers scattered on his desk. There was nothing I could do. I didn't have the power. Sarah cut in. Shortly before she disappeared, a large sum of money was deposited into your accounts. Why? Carrera shook his head slowly. I bought myself insurance. I took the money, but I also kept the documents. I never... went all the way into the dirty work. But the last time I spoke to her, I warned her, if you keep going, they'll destroy you. She didn't listen. Marcus's face darkened. Give me names, Vincent. Morrison was afraid. You're afraid. Stop being afraid. Carrera stood, walked to a painting in the corner of the room and slid it aside to reveal a small safe. He turned the lock and retrieved a thick envelope. This is what I kept back then. From those operations, payments, accounts, names. I kept it to protect myself. But it's useless now. Maybe it'll help you. Marcus took the envelope and flipped through the papers. Account summaries, lists of names, money transfers, dates. Then a name jumped out at him. Harrison Blackwood. Blackwood, Marcus muttered. Sarah's head snapped up. The district attorney back then, now a judge, he was involved. Carrera looked down. One of them, one of the very top. Nothing happened without his knowledge. Marcus slipped the envelope into his jacket, taking a deep breath. They killed her. And you were part of it. Carrera's gaze hardened as he met Marcus's eyes. I survived. Whatever you're planning to do, be careful. They're still powerful. They're still watching. As Sarah and Marcus walked toward the door, Carrera's voice followed them. If you want to find her, think about why her vest was left there. They like to erase their tracks, but sometimes they leave a warning, and that vest was a message. They can send you the same message. In the parking lot, back in the car, Sarah exhaled sharply. That man's scared to death, but he's still talking. Marcus stared ahead, gripping the envelope. Blackwood, we need to find him. Sarah nodded slowly. If Carrera's right, Blackwood's hands aren't just dirty, they're bloody. Marcus closed his eyes, and the image of Elena's final moments flashed before him, alone, at the edge of a dark highway, facing them with her honor intact, the darkness closing in around her. I have nothing to fear, Marcus said at last, because Elena wasn't afraid, and neither am I. That night, safe house. Back at the safe house, Marcus spread the envelope's documents across the table. Sarah poured tea while he examined the papers one by one. Here, names with amounts, dates, accounts, and most importantly, a payment to Cleaner. Sarah looked up. Cleaner? Hitman, the one who killed Elena. It's all here. Dates and a note. Problem solved. $50,000. Sarah frowned. Who's the cleaner? No name? No, but there are coded notes. Tomorrow morning, I'm going to the FBI. With their resources, we'll crack it. Marcus's oath. That night, Marcus held Elena's photo in his hand. The image of her shattered vest burned in his mind. Elena, I'm going all the way. I'll drag them into the light, one by one. I swear it. June 19th, 1996. FBI Los Angeles Field Office. The next morning, Marcus and Sarah sat in a dimly lit FBI conference room, far from the public's eyes. Across from them sat Agent Rebecca Torres. On the table lay the documents from Carrera, Marcus's notes, and the FBI's own reports. Torres removed her glasses and looked at Marcus. Carrera handed you something sanitized but still very powerful. These names and accounts overlap. And look here. She opened a folder and slid out a black and white photograph. In it, a young Blackwood shook hands with Carrera and several other men. Date, September 1981. Back then, Blackwood was just an up-and-coming district attorney, but clearly he was already one of the top figures in this organization, a bridge between politics, the courts, and the police. Sarah opened the file in front of her and frowned. And this payment, $50,000, marked for Cleaner. 3 days later, Elena disappears. Perfect timing. Torres nodded. That's the same conclusion we've reached. And more importantly, she lowered her voice, We've identified the cleaner. Marcus's eyes widened. Who? Torres produced another photo, a man with a soldier's bearing, cold eyes, and a deep scar on the left side of his face. Frank Russo, Vietnam veteran, dishonorably discharged, then vanished from the records. But we found him. Hotel and vehicle records place him in Barstow at the time. And that red pickup, it was his. Marcus stared at the photo, stared at the face of the man who had taken his sister's life. Where is he? He asked. Torres shrugged slightly. Currently in Mexico, Baja, living under an alias. We know his location, but extradition will take time. Sarah jumped in. What about Blackwood? How do we bring him down? He's still on the bench, still powerful. Torres's lips tightened to a thin line. Blackwood is dangerous. Very. As a judge, he can manipulate legal mechanisms, intimidate witnesses, but the documents from Carrera and Russo's eventual capture will be the beginning of his end. Marcus's eyes hardened. I'll face him. Let him see me. Let him know why I'm here. Blackwood's office. That afternoon, later that day, Marcus and Sarah arrived at Blackwood's office with an official appointment. It was on the top floor of the courthouse. Wide wooden doors, walls adorned with paintings of justice, shelves lined with thick law books, and a grand desk at the centre. Blackwood rose to greet them. His silver-grey hair was perfectly combed, his jacket buttoned, his smile politely insincere. Detective Vasquez, what an unexpected coincidence. I remember your sister's case. A tragic event. But I suspect you didn't come here just for that. Marcus leaned on the desk, locking eyes with him. Correct. I came for her killers, and one of them is sitting in front of me. For a moment, surprise flickered across Blackwood's face. Then a cold smirk replaced it. That is a very serious accusation. Do you have proof, detective? Marcus pulled a file from his pocket and dropped it on the desk. Inside were records of Blackwood's bank transactions, orders to the cleaner, notes from secret meetings. Blackwood perused the documents, then calmly closed the folder and looked up. Were you always this reckless, or did you learn that from your sister? Sarah stepped forward sharply. Game's over, Blackwood. Everything's come to light. Blackwood leaned back, tapping his fingers on the desk. You know, people like you are dangerous. You don't just burn yourselves. You burn everyone around you, just like Elena did. Look what happened to her. Marcus slammed his fist on the edge of the desk. I know exactly what happened. She did the right thing. And you stole her life. Blackwood tilted his head slightly. She signed her own death warrant. We only expedited it. As Sarah retrieved the file, she said coolly, Now it's your turn. We'll take you down, Blackwood. You and your entire network. A thin smile lingered on Blackwood's lips. Fighting me in court. That's brave. But bravery is not the same as wisdom. You can leave now. In the parking lot, silence and resolve. Outside, Sarah was still breathing heavily. He's so shameless, that calm arrogance. Marcus stared off into the distance. Because he's not afraid. Not yet. Sarah turned to him. What now? Marcus's answer was firm. We find Russo, make him talk, break Blackwood's chain through him. That night. Safe house, the plan. That night, they sat at the FBI safe house. In the middle of the table lay Elena's photo, surrounded by documents, notes, and maps. Torres set down the latest report from Mexico in front of them. We've located Russo in Baja, at a seaside villa. He's under surveillance. Tomorrow morning, we move in and bring him back. Marcus took the file and silently flipped through the pages. He could already see Russo's cold stare. The last face Elena saw. We'll find him, he said quietly, and we'll make him talk for Elena. Sarah placed a hand on his shoulder. And we'll find her grave. She's coming home. Torres removed her glasses and switched off the light. We leave early, get some rest. Tomorrow, we walk into the darkest part of the story. At dawn. Preparation. Marcus woke before sunrise. He showered, put on his suit, holstered his gun. Elena's badge was still in his pocket. He was carrying her into battle with him. Sarah waited by the door, coffee in hand. You ready? Marcus lifted his chin and replied, I'm not ready, but I have to go. Torres already had the car prepared. As the FBI convoy rolled out, Marcus leaned back in his seat and closed his eyes. He thought of Elena again. Her smile, her first day as a cop, the way she'd fastened her vest with such seriousness. He whispered to himself, just hold on a little longer, Elena. I'm coming. June 20th, 1996. Baja, Mexico. The sun had just begun to rise as the convoy made its way toward the coast. In the distance, the deep blue of the ocean shimmered behind the sound of crashing waves. Marcus sat silently in the back seat, hands resting on his knees. Sarah sat beside him, eyes on the file in her lap, not looking at him. Torres's voice crackled through the radio from the lead SUV. Target is inside the villa. 2 armed guards at the door, 1 more in the yard. No exits. We've got the perimeter secured. Marcus looked up. What if someone else is inside? Torres replied. Thermal scans show only 1 heat signature. It's him. It's Russo. Sarah grabbed the radio. Let's begin. The faster it is, the cleaner it gets. The raid on the villa, the SUVs suddenly accelerated down the dusty path, tires grinding to a halt in front of the villa. Agents in black gear rushed forward. The 2 men at the door didn't even get the chance to raise their weapons. The 3rd guard in the yard tried to run, but was quickly pinned by Torres's team. Marcus, gun drawn, approached the front door. It was kicked in, sending up a plume of dust. Inside, the air was thick, salty, and there, sitting on a leather chair in the middle of the room, was the man from the photo, Frank Russo, the scar down the left side of his face, the cold weight in his eyes, and a whiskey glass still in his hand. Russo looked up and smiled. So, you came. Marcus walked up to him and holstered his gun. Get up, your time's up. Russo slowly stood, raising his hands. Bit late, don't you think, for that little girl? Marcus's fist crashed into Russo's gut. The man doubled over but kept smiling. There it is. That's better. I get you. Anger. It's a beautiful thing. Sarah stepped in, placing a hand on Marcus's arm. We'll question him in Los Angeles, not here. Russo straightened, staring directly at Marcus. Ask me anything you want, but you might not like the answers. Marcus didn't respond. 2 agents escorted Russo out. Los Angeles, safe house interrogation room. Russo sat across the table, hands cuffed, a fresh bruise on his cheek but still smug. Torres stood in the corner. Sarah stood right behind Marcus. Marcus sat and opened the file. 1981, Elena Vasquez. You killed her. Why? Russo asked for a cigarette. Torres handed one over. He lit it, exhaled slowly. Because I was told to, simple as that. Sarah frowned. Told by who? Blackwood. Russo tilted his head. Blackwood gave the push, but the real order, it came from higher. Back then, we didn't need names. We just needed to know who was paying. Marcus's fists clenched. Where did you bury her? Russo stared into Marcus's eyes. You can beat me, break me to pieces, but one truth remains. To find that grave, you'll need more than just fists. Torres slid a photo across the table, taken at the Baja coastline. We analysed old tapes. Someone was digging there. The location matches Elena's last known position. Is it true? Russo smirked and nodded. You're smart, but still, you'll need someone to take you there. I found that spot. And I'll show you, if you'll let me go back to Mexico afterward. Sarah muttered angrily, "You're dreaming." But Marcus replied calmly, never breaking eye contact. "Here's what I can promise. We'll find that grave. And when we do, the world will know just how worthless you are." The path to the grave. Landfill. The next day, Marcus, Sarah, and Torres returned to the old landfill where Elena's vest had been found. Russo was brought along under heavy guard. He looked around as he stepped onto the gravel, squinting under the sun. "This is it. It was underneath here, but it's been years. Maybe it's still there." Sarah placed her hands on her hips, taking a deep breath. "Are you sure?" Russo nodded. "Elena was strong, my toughest job. But when the order came, I had no choice." Marcus grimaced. "There's always a choice." Torres signaled the dig team. Heavy machinery began excavating the area. The air was tense. Only the sound of shovels and digging machines filled the silence. Then a worker shouted, "We've got something here!" Marcus rushed to the pit. From beneath the dirt, a police badge emerged. Old, worn, bits of bone followed. A tattered vest, a sealed plastic bag containing old documents. Marcus dropped to his knees, gently parting the earth with his hands. Tears streamed down his face. "Welcome home, Elena. We're bringing you back." Sarah knelt beside him and placed a hand on his shoulder. "She'll finally have peace." Russo watched in silence, and for a brief moment, something like regret flickered in his eyes. What remains, the body bag, was placed carefully into the vehicle. Marcus held her badge in his hand, studying it for a long time. Torres gave him a solemn nod. "The case is solid now. Russo will talk. Blackwood's next." Marcus stood and wiped his eyes. "This is just the beginning. For Elena, for everyone like her." Sarah took a deep breath, her face steeled with resolve. "Their network will fall. This time, we go all the way." As Russo was being loaded into the patrol car, he turned to Marcus and whispered, "Don't think the war's over. It's just getting started." Marcus didn't look back, "And I'll be the one to find you first." The end. That evening, Marcus stood at Elena's small grave, placing her badge gently on the stone. His eyes welled up as he whispered the final words in his heart. "Elena, you're home now, and I promise they'll all face justice." At the grave, Sarah stood beside him. Together, they looked out at the red horizon burning like the start of a new day. On Marcus's face, a mixture of sorrow and resolve. It's over, and it's just beginning. December 15th, 1997. Federal Courthouse, Los Angeles. From the early morning hours, the courtroom was packed. Local and national press, law students, curious citizens, everyone was there. Marcus sat in the front row, turning his sister's badge over and over in his hands. Sarah was by his side. Torres stood a little farther off, speaking quietly with the FBI team. When the judge stepped heavily onto the bench, the room fell utterly silent. The files were neatly arranged on the table. State of California versus Harrison Blackwood et al. Blackwood, in a grey suit and a blank expression, sat at the defense table. The charisma he once exuded was gone. The collar of his jacket was darkened with sweat, his hair fully grey now. Marcus's eyes stayed on him. After all these years, the darkness that had hid itself so well was finally dragged into the light. Russo's testimony. When Russo was brought in, shackled, he looked like a shadow of the man he used to be. Thinner, shoulders slumped, the scar on his face even more pronounced. After taking the oath, he stepped up to the stand, and all eyes turned to him. The prosecutor asked, "Mr. Russo, what did you do on the night of October 12th, 1981? Russo hesitated for a moment. "I killed Elena Vasquez. That was the order, with Blackwood's knowledge and consent." Murmurs rippled through the room. Marcus lowered his head, fists clenched. Russo continued. I only did what I was told. I was the trigger man. But the plan, that came from them. Always from them. The prosecutor held up a photograph of Elena in uniform. Do you feel any remorse for this woman? Russo looked up, his eyes briefly meeting Marcus's with a faint crack in his expression. Yes, but that doesn't change anything for her. Blackwood's fall, when it was Blackwood's turn, he tried to keep his composure at the defense table. But everyone already knew. The bank records, the audio tapes, the witnesses. The judge looked directly into his eyes as she delivered the sentence. Harrison Blackwood, you are hereby sentenced to life in prison for organized crime, drug trafficking, abuse of office, and conspiracy to commit murder. A few claps broke out in the room before silence fell again. As his hands were cuffed, Blackwood turned to Marcus one last time, a strange, proud smile on his face. Your little victory won't last long, he whispered. Marcus only replied, Elena's name is clean now. That's enough for me. The Vasquez family's final goodbye that weekend. A full honors funeral was held to reinter Elena in one of Los Angeles' largest cemeteries. Hundreds of police officers, FBI agents, locals, media, and friends stood in solemn rows. The casket, draped in the American flag, was slowly carried to the grave as bugles played and a 3-volley salute echoed. Marcus stood between his parents, eyes brimming but unyielding. Torres came up and murmured quietly, Thanks to Elena, a lot has changed. We're grateful to her. Sarah slipped her arm through his. She's a hero. She always will be. As the casket was lowered, Marcus reached into his pocket, pulled out the badge and knelt, placing it on the earth. Rest in peace now. I promise you, I'll find every last one of them hiding in the dark. For a moment, the sunlight caught the badge in the wind, as though Elena herself was thanking him. A new beginning. A few days later, Marcus sat at his desk once more. Before him lay a new file. Russo had named others, conspirators yet to be brought to light. Sarah knocked and came in, 2 coffees in hand. I know this is just the beginning. Are you ready? Marcus closed the file, looked up at her. I'm not afraid of anything anymore, because Elena showed me what courage looks like. Sunlight streamed through the window, resting on the file's cover. Vasquez investigation, the final shadows. Marcus thought to himself, everything has a price, and justice belongs to those who wait. He picked up his pen, opened the file, and wrote the first line. For Elena Vasquez, December 15th, 2000. 3 years later, Los Angeles. Another hazy morning dawned over Los Angeles. Marcus stepped into the cemetery, carrying a small bouquet of white lilies. The soft rustle of damp grass beneath his shoes echoed faintly in the quiet. 3 years had passed, and in those 3 years, so much had changed. Russo was serving out the rest of his life in a high-security prison. Blackwood had suffered a heart attack in his cell in 1999 and died. Crawford was still alive, but the years left to him would rot away behind bars. And Elena was no longer just the subject of a case file, a criminal investigation, or a journalist's headline. She had become a symbol of courage, taught in academies across the country. At his sister's grave, Marcus stood before Elena's headstone. The words etched into the stone gleamed like gold in the morning light. Elena Vasquez, 1955, 1981. Courage, honor, justice. He stood still for a moment, then placed the flowers on the grave and took a deep breath. Hello, little sister. That's what he had called her when they were kids, always looking out for her, walking her home from school. But really, it had always been Elena who was the strongest. Even those who killed her hadn't had her kind of courage. I made you a promise. I said I'd find them all and make them answer. And I did. One by one, I faced them. Justice was done. Everyone remembers you now as a hero, and what was done to you was never buried. He stepped back and glanced around. Since the day of her funeral, every month a few officers would come and leave flowers. Children came with their schools to learn her story. Her name was mentioned in documentaries. An academy building had even been named in her honor, Elena Vasquez Center for Ethics. Just then, his phone buzzed. A message from Sarah. Ready to go over the new evidence? I'll be at the office in an hour. Marcus smiled faintly. He and Sarah had become a solid team. He couldn't have done it without her. But today still belonged to Elena. Today was still her day, the closing of justice. He knelt beside the headstone and pulled out an old police badge from his pocket. It was tarnished but still gleamed faintly. He'd kept it all these years, to leave it here, on this final visit. He placed it gently on the earth. I'm still carrying the dream you had, to be a detective. And I'll always follow in your footsteps. I'll never forget you, Elena. A light breeze passed, and for a moment, it felt as if her spirit was there, resting a hand on his shoulder. He stood quietly for a while, watching the sunlight slip across the stone, starting a new day. He rose, straightened his jacket, and took a deep breath. As he left the cemetery, the sun was climbing higher. Another message from Sarah waited on his phone. Remember, every step of the way, I'm with you. He smiled softly. Turning the key in the ignition, the engine hummed to life, and he thought to himself, it's time to move forward. We brought light to the darkness of the past. Elena is at peace, and I'll keep carrying her legacy. He drove away, leaving behind the grave covered in white lilies and the shining headstone. Elena Vasquez's story was now complete. The names of those who had plotted to silence her were etched into history with shame. Her name, meanwhile, would forever be remembered as one of courage, honor, and justice. And Marcus finally understood. Elena was never just a victim. She had been a light piercing the darkness, and that light would go on shining forever.